My most asked question is like, how do you get the access? Truth be told, I think it's just like, just look at me. My appearance is disalarming, and so then it allows access to that. For me, I chose to be there. These people didn't. They had no other choice and they didn't have an out. So at the very least, all right, let's get your story out there. Let's make sure people know what is actually happening in this place.
This has been a hot spot for smuggling humans, drug trafficking.
One of the things you said that really interests me is you talked about the cartels having a pipeline through Canada.
Yep.
This is what police say Mexican drug cartels are slipping into Canada. $83 million worth of cocaine.
Less than 1% of what comes into the port is even monitored, and rail is even less than that. And then there's also land crossings.
You mentioned China working with the cartels. The motivation for China certainly isn't drug money.
No, it's not money. It's ideological and it's power. It's about seeing the erosion of Western societies, and what better way to do that than through drugs?
I'm sure, over the years of doing this, you've had to have some close calls, some scary moments. Can you share with us one of your most terrifying moments? Yeah. Hey, so welcome to another episode of The Resilience Show. And today we're here in Texas with Katarina Szulc.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here. And congratulations on your new show, Borderlands.
Thank you.
With Ironclad.
Yeah, it's very exciting. It gives the platform to tell all the stories that matter.
So what's it been like? I want to get into the topic that we're going to discuss today with the cartels and all this work you do. But I'm just sitting there thinking, what's it like for you? You're doing this by yourself. You just mentioned you're doing this by yourself and you're backed up by Ironclad.
Yeah.
But things change really quickly. You got the opportunity to go on Sean Ryan's show and things just have blown up. Did you feel like they were blown up before, or that really...
That was sort of
things?
a tipping point for me, because over the course of me covering organized crime, I had already noticed there was massive interest from the public, and a lot of people were really appreciative of my reporting, and I was doing all of it alone. And a lot of people didn't know that I was, I was going to Culiacan alone after they captured El Mayo, and I was showing the dead bodies and the shootouts, and I didn't have protection, and I was conducting these interviews just with a little bit of faith in a camera, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
And a couple shots of vodka. But then I started to realize I had to kind of tap in so more people were exposed to the stories that I was telling. One side of journalism is, okay, you can go in and tell these strong stories and gather the sources and the information. But another side of it is sort of like this business component where you have to make sure that people are actually consuming what you're putting out there. And so I started saying yes to a lot of the podcast invitations that I got. And then Ironclad brought me under their wing. And then actually before I signed with them, the Sean Ryan show reached out to me and said, we'd love to have you on. And a really funny story is I went in thinking, okay, this is what I know. This is what I want to talk about. This is what I think people should know. And particularly the Canada aspect of the cartels have expanded their operations. And after that interview, I remember going back to the hotel and thought, I did the shittiest job ever. I sound like a little kid who has no idea what they're talking about and is just trying to get information that I know out there. But afterwards, I realized the public was really receptive to it, and a lot of the response was very pleasant. People felt like they learned something and they were tapping into a niche that may have interested them, but they weren't experts in. And we're saying, well, now you are the leading subject matter expert. I realized, I don't do this for the validation, but I realized, okay, there are a lot of people who care about these stories that I'm telling. And now, well, I'm more locked in than ever.
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be a little bit of responsibility. You feel like
it is.
Now those stories have not been told. And one of the things you said that really interests me, to just kind of kick it off, is you talked about the cartels having a pipeline through Canada and the United States to move drugs in the United States. First of all, what kind of drugs are being moved in? Where are they moving them in? And who's looking the other way?
So first of all, I think most law enforcement agencies are looking the other way, particularly in Canada, because they simply don't have the resources or the manpower to deal with it. And I have been told this by law enforcement sources in Canada, who would, of course, not say this publicly, as they can't. They fear, whatever backlash they would get. But off the record.
So you don't think complicit? You think? I mean, I'm sure there's some complicity.
There's a level of complicit actions,
but a lot of it is just incompetent and not capable.
Exactly. Yeah. They're incapable of dealing with this big beast of transnational organized crime that has fallen upon Canada. And so over a year ago was when I first flagged this issue. And there are a lot of other really great Canadian crime reporters who have been talking about the ties between cartels in Canada and China and Canada, particularly because of fentanyl precursors. And in Canada, at the Port of Vancouver, we have this open port, essentially. I said this on Sean Ryan, that less than 1% of what comes into the port is even monitored. And rail is even less than that. And then there's also land crossings. So knowing how much of an influence China has in Canada, the cartels, and also knowing how open the border is, the cartels began sending operatives and associates into Canada over a decade ago at this point to amp up operations where they knew they could access these precursors that were getting shipped in, collude with local domestic organized crime groups that had already been established and had ties with the cartels already, because it's important to also look back historically during a time when marijuana was not legalized, and BC Bud, British Columbia, the province where Vancouver is, was the hottest commodity. We were known to have the best marijuana in the world. And a lot of the organized crime groups in Canada were already dealing with this marijuana with the Sinaloa cartel. And so those connections were already made. But fentanyl and our open borders and our ports essentially allowed cartels this golden ticket to a gateway to an extremely lucrative pipeline to drive into the United States. And so sure, fentanyl is coming in to the United States from Canada, but I think also most importantly, and I don't push this hard enough, is a lot of fentanyl precursors are being brought into the United States from Canada.
You mentioned China working with the cartels. Is the motivation from China certainly isn't drug money?
No, it's not money. It's ideological and it's power. It's about seeing the erosion of Western societies. And what better way to do that than through drugs? I mean, you look back at the dynasties and in Chinese history, how drugs were used by the British to destroy their society.
It's warfare.
It's warfare. It's chemical warfare. And they've managed to tap into this market that has an insatiable appetite for drugs.
So if you look at the United States on a national defense standpoint, why is the United States treating fentanyl like a drug problem and not a national security problem?
That's a really interesting question. And I think it comes back to a level of ignorance. I'm not going to lie, because I still, even when I'm talking with very high level people about these high level topics, I still hear people say, well, people just have to stop doing drugs. And I completely disagree with that, because, even if everyone who does drugs stopped doing drugs, you really don't think there would be some other type of illicit financial pipeline that would be used to make money for these organized crime groups? I mean, come on. To me, it's a pathetic response. Human trafficking, crude oil, agriculture, you name it. Mm-hmm. There's a black market for anything. And so I think it's a level of ignorance, and it's also a level of, this is such a big problem. We don't want to deal with it. We don't know how to deal with it. But it's certainly a national security issue, and it's also a public health crisis.
So you're Canadian citizen, and soon to be an American.
Yeah, hopefully. It's around the corner.
Well, you should be. You're fighting for America with your voice. But
I fight for the people who are disproportionately affected by organized crime, drugs, and any type of violence that they don't choose to be around.
And just so happens to be, we're a center of it. America is a target. Of that. So the presidential administration has just changed the United States this past year. Radical change, a 180 in much of our policy.
100%.
Are you seeing policy changes that protect America more in this area, or is this new administration still missing the mark?
I think this administration has certainly kept their word in terms of cracking down on organized crime groups, particularly the cartels. I mean, first of all, by labeling them as foreign terrorist organizations in January. A lot of people don't know, but Greg Abbott had already signed a designation calling them foreign terrorist organizations a while back. Mm-hmm. But this happened now on a federal, national level that also involved Mexico. Mm-hmm. And then it appears
explain that when you said that involved Mexico.
Well, this is what I'm going to say is I think that the actions that this administration has taken, whether that's through designating them FTOs, calling to shut down, really lock down the southern border on both fronts, has kind of strong-armed Mexico into giving the U.S. a wide open back door. We're seeing collaborative efforts to an extent between the U.S. and Mexico, but a lot of what's happening, particularly when we see these transfers, we just had one this week. So far, 2 major transfers of large figures within the narco world have been brought from Mexican prisons into the United States to face justice here. And these actions are not following typical extradition treaties between the U.S. and Mexico. We're not seeing this made public. And then, for example, the U.S. allows a bunch of El Chapo's family members to cross into San Diego through the Tijuana border crossing. And Mexico saying, we weren't made aware of this. This is absolutely horrible. And they're trying to take legal action. And they're saying that, well, if the U.S. wants to crack down on cartels and organized crime violence, then they need to stop allowing for guns to come into our country, because over 70% of guns found at Mexican crime scenes are American manufactured. And so there's this loud pushback from the Mexican government while still handling these superficial, I would call them superficial, collaborative operations. But then we're seeing a lot go down. That's really proving my point that there's this wide open backdoor that the Mexican administration has allowed the U.S. to just come in and kind of tidy up the mess that Mexico hasn't been able to tidy up. And I want to clarify by saying I don't think Mexico is incapable of handling the cartels. They certainly are. And there are a lot of very strong-willed, competent, intelligent people in Mexico who absolutely hate the cartels and are tired of organized crime. The problem is there is such a high level of corruption and impunity to match that no matter what, that crackdown would just never be enough to really end the bad guys.
You recently have made a statement that became pretty high profile.
Yeah.
That you I don't want correct me if I'm wrong, but you made the accusation that the president of Mexico was connected to the cartels. Mm-hmm. And she didn't like that.
She didn't like that. And a lot of people didn't like that. And a lot of people decided to align me or disalign me with a certain Mexican political party by saying that I was taking a political stance. When in reality, any person with half a brain who looks at what's been done to combat the cartels and what hasn't been done would tell you the same thing. There has been such a mark, a bloody mark on the human toll in Mexico due to cartel violence. And of course, that's just not only just Mexico, because a lot of people also blame the U.S. government for working with the Chapitos to kidnap, capture, and prosecute El Mayo, one of the leaders of a faction of the Sinaloa cartel, saying that that sparked immense bloodshed across Mexico. But, you know, I previously said that went viral. I think she has cartel ties. Mm-hmm. She has cartel ties. Mm-hmm. She allows a lot of corruption and impunity and violence to occur in a country that has such a beautiful culture and is marked by such an ugly underbelly. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, when I first started covering this, I managed to gather a lot of sources high up in the Mexican federal government who will never be revealed. Mm-hmm. And I know that a lot of people say, well, if she's telling the truth, she'll reveal her sources. You know, if I actually value my life and the lives of the people who are willing to put their lives on the line to tell me this information, I'm never revealing those sources, and I could not give what people have to say about that. Yeah. But I received a lot of information from them that was so black and white that there is such a high level of corruption and ties to organized crime. It's indisputable at this point. And you look down the line of the political hierarchy in Mexico and you see governors being sanctioned and National Guard members and governors being on the payroll of the very criminals torturing their communities that they're meant to protect. the degradation of integrity it's blatant, and it's a slap in the face to any person living in that country who's working an honest job and trying to make an honest life for themselves or their family members.
Well, I think, what you have done is used to be called journalism, and political elected political figures should always be held accountable through good
100%
journalism. And I don't know if she's responded. I think she's responded to your
and there's been quite a few responses from up there. So, but I think journalism at its core is, I say this all the time, it's a pillar of democracy, and to ensure that the people who are meant to maintain the highest level of integrity are held accountable. That's democracy to its core. And so if you disagree with that, you're not disagreeing with me. You're not disagreeing with what I have to say. You're disagreeing with democracy. So
yeah. So, I mean, I think this is an important point, though, because journalism, in my opinion, has been long lost in the mainstream media. And so people aren't accustomed anymore to hearing real journalists go out there in the field, in the trenches, gathering truths and exposing truths. And so when people see that, it seems radical. What you're doing seems radical, but it's not radical.
People just aren't used to it. Yeah. And, I never expect anyone to appreciate something they can't understand. If you don't like what I'm doing, I simply believe it's just because you don't understand it. But, I worked in mainstream media at the beginning of my career. I had a positive experience. But there comes a point where if you really want to push and dive as deep as possible into the guts of the story and expose people, you kind of have to be a lone wolf. Funny, in the Lone Star State, right? But that's, and it's really hard. You bust your ass and you get a lot of pushback, but the message is very clear. The purpose is clear here.
I think everybody knows when you hear cartels, people would know, cartels are probably associated with drugs and crime. But just in a short overview, could you tell us your definition of what a cartel is?
Yeah, a cartel is an organized crime group. Honestly, it's a terrorist organization.
President Trump and Greg Abbott got it right.
It's a terror group, especially because it's no longer just drugs. So if you asked me this question in the 80s or the 90s, I would say, well, it's a criminal organization that produces and traffics drugs. Today, their operations have expanded so far beyond drugs, and their reach has expanded globally that's a terror organization. And it's not a terror organization in a way where you could compare it to the Taliban, right? Or Al-Qaeda, because unlike a lot of these textbook terror groups, it's not ideological, it's operational. So they aren't going and, bombing a public place where there will be a lot of casualties in the name of a religion or a radical ideology. Rather, they're producing drugs that kill people, and people are willingly taking these drugs. But the way they have managed to set up operations in terms of, it's not just drugs anymore. It's extortion, kidnapping, agriculture, crude oil theft, human trafficking, sex trafficking, and propaganda through music, pop culture, social media, movies. That's textbook terror, honestly. Yeah. And they're causing terror across all boards and all societies. It's not just in Mexico.
Across borders, yes.
Yeah, it's across borders,
And I think the one commonality, in my experience being, working around, different terror groups and around the world, one of the commonalities I see with the cartels and traditional terror groups like the Taliban is it's all about power and control.
Yes.
They want power, they want control, narcissistic behaviors to feed their own, egos. Agenda, egos and agenda. Yeah. So there's a lot of commonalities in that. You're not the kind of person that people probably expect to be sneaking around.
No.
and Mexico's in cartels and embedding yourself to get this information. You just don't fit that profile. So
I don't at all, completely unalarming. And my most asked question is how do you get the access? And I kind of avoided giving like what I really think is the answer for so long. But truth be told, I think it's just like, just look at me. I mean, you would not think a 24-year-old girl is just gonna waltz in and be like, hey guys, so tell me how you make fentanyl and where you're doing it and how you're trafficking it. And I refrain from judging. Like it's just not really in my nature to judge anyone that I don't fully know. And so I go in with a very open mind. My appearance is disalarming, and so then it allows access to that. And yeah, I'm not like the textbook crime reporter. Really.
Well, I mean, so certainly, I mean, being in those environments, gaining access to those environments, I'm sure, you know, over the years of doing this, you've had to have some close calls, some scary moments. Can you share with us one of the most terrifying moments?
Yeah, we both have this question for each other because I think we can go like, I was going to say toe to toe, but definitely not actually. I think for me, it wasn't, I've had some direct threats where I'm in an environment and someone is like, who the hell are you? And if you can't prove to us that you're just a journalist, we're going to kill you. Or especially as a woman, rape is always like a scary thought.
Yeah.
And because of the environments that I'm in, and I'm typically always around men, sometimes, you know, there's a fine line where it kind of borders, okay, this could turn sexually violent, where, you know, it starts with compliments or something like that. And, you know, typically I can receive it well, but then I get a bit on edge. But I think beyond that, a fear has been, okay, I have sources within the government and within the criminal underworld, and both of those groups know that. So I'm always afraid that at some point in time, I'm used as a pawn to try to connect those two. And I did have a close call where I was interviewing some figures in organized crime in Mexico, and we were at this really like nefarious and undisclosed location, and we're doing the interviews, and then the National Guard pulls up and they're quote unquote looking for someone, looking for something, and I'm not allowed to film. And I take the SD cards out and hide them, and they want me to delete all my footage. Thankfully that it wasn't accessible at that point, but it made me think, okay, first of all, I'm being tracked, so I have to regroup all of my technology understanding and like all of the protocols that I have, because they want me to expose something to them that they don't have access to and they know I have access to. So that was a close call for me, because why am I interviewing these narcos in a really secretive spot, and then a bunch of National Guard vehicles and members pull up and they're all of a sudden looking for someone and something, and they want to look at all my shit. Why? So I can incriminate these people? That's not my job. I am not a cop. Never will be.
Have you felt like, I mean, certainly you had to be like, if I seen you in that environment and I was in that environment, I'd be like, this girl's probably to the agency.
Yeah.
Because you had to have been accused of that before.
I get that a lot. It's always, she's CIA or APAC or Mossad. And it's like, why the would I have the social media presence? I mean, I guess it makes sense.
Sure,
I don't know. I'm also not American, so I think people forget that, right? They think all of a sudden. But yeah, I get that a lot. I mean, again, it has to do with people won't be able to appreciate what they can't understand. And I think that's just one of those things. They don't understand how I built my career or what I do or why I do it. So there has to be some crazy explanation.
A lot of success really fast.
Yeah.
You're young. Yeah. You come off at you sound highly intelligent.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Likewise.
So I mean, I could see that. So, I mean, in some senses, I feel like that might be an obstacle for you to get access, because people are paranoid that you're there to bust them. Or
interestingly enough, a lot of the criminals, I guess, you know, they have really good intuitions. So I always say, like, real recognizes real, honestly. And those guys, they, for the most part, keep it very real. And so do I. So they can tell, you know, I'm not a Fed. I'm not with any 3-letter agency. So there, and in my reporting, I think, you know, they're privy to the knowledge that I'm reporting on. So I typically don't have distrust with them. And with government organizations, it's not, it's funny because they're more likely to think that I'm actually working like for or with the cartel than the cartels are thinking that I'm working for or with the government. Mm-hmm. I'm not working with either. I'm working with Ironclad. But it's so weird to have to clarify that. It doesn't seem like a reality. Do you get that?
Yeah, I've certainly got that because, I in fact have actually been doing that. So, I mean, I've had to deal with that, with being accused of something that I actually was doing and then be able to work through that. And
how did you do that? How did you work through it?
I mean, one, working in an undercover capacity, we always stay as close to the truth as possible. The bigger the lie is, the harder it is to keep up with.
For sure.
And so, there's been areas of the world I worked in a covered capacity where I actually had worked under a different name. And then there was another country I worked in. I won't say the name of the country because it's the Pentagon redacted it in my Pentagon review of one of my books. But I was working in the country and I had to work in real name because of the technology. Pisces, which is a facial recognition software that we gave to the whole world and hurts us for our covert operations. And so I'm working in real name. So when you work in a real name, the internet, further we get along in the future, the more accessible information is. Mm-hmm. And so, part of my profile, my persona is that, was in fact in the military. And so I was, just met with this guy, individual, and he was definitely a foreign intelligence officer. Very clear he was, but he was posing to be someone in the same industry that I was claiming to be in. And I was in a suit, and we're walking through the capital of this country, and we walk across this lawn, and dust got on my shoes, and my shiny, nice dress shoes. Mm-hmm. And as I got across the lawn, I did something that a million military people do. I shined my shoes
on your pants,
on the back of my pants, just out of habit. And he immediately stopped and asked me, "Why'd you do that? Were you in the military?" And I said, "Well, yes, I was. Were you?" So it's staying as close to the truth as possible is always a really good strategy for working in that kind of capacity.
Great. I'll keep that in mind if any 3-letter agency ever reaches out to me. I'm joking.
Well, one of the things that's the reason I'm bringing this up with you, and I'm kind of where I was kind of getting to is you're not going to be low profile anymore.
No.
I mean, you're on this show. I think for my, you've had millions of views just on Sean Ryan's episode alone. So people are going to know who you are, but I don't think that prohibits you from work anymore because you're
I won't let it at the end of the day. Talk about this all the time. Well, first of all, was not in this for like fame or recognition. Never will be. I love telling stories and getting into being on the front lines and getting to the guts of the human suffering and what's going on and exposing the truth. That's what journalism is. But yeah, it does kind of change the way I have to operate a little bit because then people do recognize you. I don't know.
There's pros and cons to it. Here's the truth. And for what it's worth to you, everyone wants to share their side of the story.
100%.
Good people, bad people.
And everyone in between.
President Osama bin Laden sat in front of a camera and put out his side of the story from a cave. Everyone wants to share their side of the story. And as long as you're providing them a fair and honest platform to share their side of the story, most people in power, like we said earlier, are going to have egos. They're going to be narcissistic and they love being in front of camera. And so you could always leverage that to your ability and do what you're doing. So I don't think my personal opinion is, I don't think it prohibits you at all from continuing to do what you're doing. In fact, I think it's going to help you.
Well, to be completely honest, I actually have gathered quite a few more strong sources over the course of this whole blowing up period because people now know, oh, she can be the one who puts this story out there. I can give her this information, walk away, and she can do whatever she has to do with it. And they know that I don't reveal anyone. So that has been a pro of it for sure because I've been able to access information to so many of the questions that I had, which is really cool.
Yeah. So one of the things you mentioned was you mentioned it twice that now these cartels are designated as terrorist organizations. You said that you think that was appropriate that they are. Yep. What's that mean in your opinion, for America to fight them as a terrorist organization? When I say fight them, like counter the narcotics areas of cartels, to treat them as a terrorist organization, not just as a, in the drug fight, the fight war on drugs.
So first things first, I think that there's this kind of misconception where people interpreted the FTO designation as like American boots are going to hit the ground in Mexico and just like slaughter all of them.
Right.
Whereas, first of all, if that were to happen, it wouldn't be right now. Second of all, Mexico would not like that. But more importantly, that isn't the initiative here. The main effective factor of the FTO designation is hitting the financial pipelines. So sanctioning certain figures, whether that be people who are laundering money for the cartel and they're based in the U.S., not cracking down on shell companies, revoking visas. And we're seeing this happen. There are
real time right
now.
Yeah.
Even just last week, a Mexican singer, El Macabélico, famous rapper.
That's a good accent, by the way.
Thank you. I speak Spanish. I love talking to you guys because you guys are. Stop rolling your R's, please. Anyways,
it didn't sound Canadian.
So. He was just sanctioned. All his music was removed off of every streaming platform, including YouTube, Apple Music, for allegedly using his platform and his music to launder money for the cartels. And then you have like that boxer, Julio Cesar Chavez. He was deported. He had a warrant in Mexico, and now he's been essentially like revoked from accessing the U.S. in any capacity because he was working as a muscle man for the Sinaloa cartel, beating people up like a boxing bag as they were hanging upside down. So textbook, bad person committing bad actions, right? And so these are the types of actions that the FTO designation is allowing the government to take, whether that be stepping up military presence at the border, and most importantly, cracking down on these financial pipelines, identifying and taking actions on the bank accounts that are using to wire and launder money for criminal purposes, and making sure that the people who are aiding and abetting these criminals don't have access to the money and to the U.S. I think that there's been a little bit of backpedaling in this that I don't think is a good reflection of the administration's approach. And I think that a major one for that is allowing El Chapo's family immunity and visas to come into the U.S. Of course, that's in an effort to gain information from the Chapitos, El Chapo's sons. But I think if we're looking at an overall umbrella approach of this, it needs to be streamlined across the board. I could be completely wrong in terms of what I think is the best actions, but I think at this point I have a fair understanding to make an informed opinion on what I think is right and wrong. And I think that crackdown needs to be strong across the board.
Yeah, there's no compromises. It's really interesting you say this, because my first thought when they're designated as a terrorist organization, coming from the world I come from, it's like, okay, like we're going after the head, we're taking the head off the snake. And people that don't know, JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, is not just a bunch of, really high level assaulters with guns that kick in doors and kill bad guys. The JSOC machine, the intelligence gathering capability, the resources they have to operate, what makes them actually a tier 1 special missions unit is they operate this independent capability, and there's nowhere on the planet that if they want to go out and capture or kill someone that you could hide. And so my first thought is this action that's going to go after and take the head off the snake. And I don't know if that's going to happen, but hearing what you're talking about the sanctioning, killing the financial pipeline, it's
because without money, there's no power.
Right.
Like money to them is everything. And without money, there's no morale. I mean, if people aren't getting paid, they're not going to work for them due to pure ideology. Again, this isn't the Taliban. Yeah. So these people are in it for the money. Of course, a lot of them to feel a part of something, to feel powerful. But when you talk about cutting the head off the snake, the Kingpin strategy does not work for the cartels, and we've seen this time and time again. I am a big hater of the Kingpin strategy because
when you say that, this is us. some guys going in a room and killing the leader.
Yeah, you have tier 1 operators going in, getting who they think is enemy number 1, and then it's a hydra. 2 bigger, badder heads grow back. And I can tell you right now who, if you went in and you captured all of the most wanted guys from like that the U.S. has most wanted listed, I could give you 5 names right now of who are going to be the next bigger and badder guys with more expertise, more understanding of how the U.S. operates and how to better run cartel operations. You're honestly just making them more adaptable at that point. It's really about targeting the financial pipelines and the propaganda. So if there's no money, there's no morale, there's no manpower, and those bigger, badder guys don't come up and 2 heads don't grow back. But that Kingpin strategy, we've seen it just, success, fail, success. Like, who cares at this point? To me, it's like, you want to get the bad guy, you're going to have to take everyone under him down too. And I was going to say that's mission impossible, but I know that you guys are like, nothing is mission impossible for our people.
No, but I mean, there's smarter ways to do things, and cutting off the financials.
Yeah.
Who do you think in the United States government is responsible for that? Is it, are you familiar with what department it might be, or who's?
Okay, so most of the sanctions are coming from like it's OFAC, the Treasury. They're designating who's being sanctioned, but it's certainly a collaborative effort because this involves attacking the cartels involves DEA because they're focusing on drugs.
Yep.
But then you need to get Homeland, FBI, essentially every department, because you can't just hit the drugs and you can't just hit the criminals. Like I said, you have to hit the financial pipelines and then you have to hit intelligence because these guys too, it's important to keep in mind, they're very technologically advanced. They have expert drone operators. I mean, I just reported in a Dispatches episode how the cartels were sending operatives to Ukraine to learn FPV drone tactics so that they could go back to Mexico, teach everyone else, and boom, now everyone knows first-person view drone tactics and drone blockers and any technology that has to do with dealing with this. So not only can they attack rival cartels and hit their adversaries, but they're also hitting Mexican military. So I started with one point and I go to another because there's so much fucking information to go after. Yeah, I think it involves every single department's capacity.
How familiar are you with OFAC? The OFAC process? Like
in sanctioning these people?
What's OFAC? You know what it stands for?
Office of Foreign Assets Control. So they're the ones, that's what it stands for. So it's essentially, it's part of the Treasury's Office of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence. And so they're always updating their list here. You have it anywhere in the world, right? Afghanistan, Balkans, Belarus, Mexico, Latin America. And they're always updating who they're sanctioning, who's on that list, and why. And they really, it's nice. I have it bookmarked because I'm always checking because there's always someone new.
Well, one of the things it does is it puts pressure on banks. And
it does.
I mean, I was doing a humanitarian rescue operation, and I'll call them out. Wells Fargo was our bank at the time. They're not anymore because of this. And I had to move. I had $2 million come into the bank, and I had to withdraw $2 million in cash. And I got a letter from Congress, from the House Foreign Affairs Committee, sent it to the bank and said, hey, we got this permission to move this cash. I'm going to be flying with this cash. I'm going to be flying on a private jet with $2 million in cash, but I have a letter from the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And Wells Fargo shut down. And I mean, they shut down our bank account. Like, we have an organization that we run. I mean, Mighty Oaks Foundation, does, $7 million a year in veteran service organization, nonprofit work. And all of our employees, credit cards wouldn't work, everything. They shut everything down. And
they have to be careful.
They have to be careful, right? And so I was not happy, obviously. And so they're not my bank anymore because they disregarded the fact that we had a letter from the House Foreign Affairs Committee, signed by Congress for this money. But nonetheless, though, that's what we're talking about. They're not only the banks are going to even have pressure to control these funds and monitor the moving of these funds as well.
Yeah, and it's also very clear, a lot of the banks, I don't want to say because I probably would get like a defamation something, but there are certain banks, international banks, they have head offices in Mexico City, and then strong ties in the United States. They operate in the United States, and these are blatant funnels for money laundering and remittance services as well. I talk about this all the time. I think that, we talk about how crypto is used for money laundering, and sure, it's a major player. But I think it's also super hard to regulate. And if there were certain avenues that the government and officials wanted to take in order to try to regulate this money laundering and this blood money, it would be through remittance apps, those money transfer services, and the banks that are doing it so blatantly. Yeah.
The southern border, well, I guess and northern border of the United States, went through, a very, very highlighted in America over the last previous 4 years administration of this, surge of illegal immigration to America. How did the cartels take advantage of that window, and what were the failures in the previous administration with protecting our border?
They managed to construct and enforce some really critical tunnels for the cartels and for these illegal operations to go across the border completely unmonitored. And I know that especially this administration they really want to crack down on those tunnels, because just a few weeks ago, maybe months ago at this point, my idea of time is like all messed up with these stories, but they found a tunnel that led from Juarez into El Paso, and it was completely reinforced. It was insulated. It had AC. It was really tall and wide, and that became a major route for, of course, human smuggling, but also drug trafficking, arms trafficking, you name it. If it's illegal, it was happening in that tunnel. And so when they found that tunnel, cracked down on it, they became aware, U.S. officials became aware that there were many other tunnels like this that were built during the previous administration, just because of how easy it was for these guys to run these operations during this time. And so even if we're seeing illegal border crossing numbers down and drug trafficking through the borders down, there's so much that's happening literally underground because they were able to build and reinforce these tunnels. And I know that the government is trying to crack down on that, but it's difficult.
Yeah, it's 4 years of uncontrolled border.
So imagine your northern border, how many decades of that of an uncontrolled border that's over 5,000 miles long and basically wide open.
Yeah, I mean, also it's a little easier to hide on a northern border. Outside of desert, you have forest.
Yeah.
And the terrain is much easier to hide, crossing routes.
Entirely. And at this point, there have been so many connections that have been built on both sides of the border that you could essentially just get like a bag full of fentanyl precursors and just toss it over to your southern neighbor in the United States, and there you go, mission accomplished.
So we're talking a lot about drugs, and I think it's important, but I think the drug issue, the fentanyl issue, sometimes casts a big shadow over the human trafficking issue, and doesn't get talked about as much, I think, as it should, because so many children that come across that border. I remember Mayorkas is getting, in the Senate floor, and he didn't even know about these wristbands that these kids were getting smuggled across, and what the wristbands mean. He's a secretary of Homeland Security, and he didn't even know what these were, and at least he said he didn't know what they were.
Yeah.
But we had, we had 4 years of over 100,000. I don't know the number. I'm guessing well over 100,000 children get smuggled in the United States, and no one knows where they are.
Yeah,
unaccompanied minors coming across. No one knows where they are. How big? I don't want to say was that problem, because these are our children. I say our children, I mean the world's children that are still alive here.
Completely innocent, vulnerable people.
And they're here in the country. So how big is that problem?
It's a massive problem, of course, especially if we're talking about it. I mean, I have heard a lot of stories, and also I'm careful like with what I say about human trafficking, because there's also like this line between fact, conspiracy, opinion, and it's a very touchy subject because we're talking about innocent like children. So, for example, in Brownsville, Texas, there was this massive, I think it used to be a Walmart. It was a large department store that was being used to house the unaccompanied minors. And a lot of them just...
By the government or by...
By the government.
Okay.
And then a lot of them just disappeared and were completely untraceable. And it's important to keep in mind that not all of these kids that were coming across the border unaccompanied were coming from, like, they're not Mexican. They were coming from all over the world, okay? So you have kids from further down South America, but then you have kids from Asia, and they're coming by themselves or with an adult that they do not know.
Some kid coming from Asia doesn't know how to get to America, or that they want to get to America.
You're telling me that this 7-year-old girl crossed the Darien Gap because she wanted a better life in America with some adult that, you know, is supposed to be her caretaker? Everything. The thing with these types of stories is if you connect the dots, you come to a conclusion that is really unfavorable. I'm sure you know that.
And I mean, not to sugarcoat it, it's sex. Like the kids aren't being brought here for anything other than the sex trade.
Yeah, this is not organs.
They're being sexually trafficked in the United States.
Yeah. And there's a lot of perverts and pedophiles that exist in our world, unfortunately. Yeah. I hate talking about this topic. You know, I'd rather talk about the drugs because it really does break my heart.
It's horrible. It's and
there's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
That's where I have an issue with this, is I cannot sit here and be like, okay, these are some of the ways that I think we can combat this, because it runs so fucking deep and it goes beyond criminal organizations. There is such a high, if we want to talk about corruption, let's talk about child sex trafficking. It's heinous. It's despicable, honestly. So we see hundreds of thousands of kids that end up in the US or are, you know, being caught by CBP, whoever it is, crossing the border with people that they don't know. And we've seen many videos of kids who are drugged. They're completely knocked out and they're with a group of grown men that, oh, this is my daughter. This is my daughter. No, it's not. You can't even wake her up. You don't even know her name.
Have you seen the videos of, and by the way, I'm very pro law enforcement. I love our law enforcement officers. Many of them are doing their job, especially under the last administration. I felt like they were backed in such a corner, especially on the border. But there's videos of minors getting escorted by people in Border Patrol or U.S. Customs, and they actually taxpayer funded buses, airplanes, and being handed off to other individuals.
Yeah.
Can you explain, like, at least your perception of what that is?
Yeah, my perception of that is it's there's a level of negligence, but then also a level of complicity. I think something I mention a lot that a lot of people don't like, but it's just matter of fact, is that there are a lot of law enforcement officials, and this is not me saying I'm not like ACAB. No, it's they're on organized crime payroll, unfortunately. You have your good apples, your bad apples, as in any organization. But then there's a level of, okay, well, this is what we're supposed to do, right? This person came to retrieve this child, or...
And this is the policy.
This is the policy that we're following. So here you go. I mean, it's out of my hands. And I think that when you're dealing with such a large beast and like such a large responsibility, like children, unaccompanied children who you can't even communicate with them in your language, who you don't know where they're coming from or who they belong to, you're going to follow what you're told to do with them and hope for the best, because what more can you do? Right. I mean, a good example of this is when I first started in journalism, I was covering a lot of child murders, unfortunately. And you just get to a point where you're like, well, what the hell am I supposed to do about this? It may make you upset, enraged, whatever it is, but you can only go so far in your actions. And I think that that's what's happening with a lot of law enforcement that's working these cases and working the border. But to be honest, I haven't dug so deep into human trafficking simply because, and you know, I may sound kind of pathetic for saying this, but I don't want to. It's such a big beast that's really tragic.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to swallow what's really happening, and it's very, to me, it's very obvious.
It's so obvious.
It's so obvious what's happening. And when you talk about corruption, and to be very clear, is politics in Mexico corrupt? Yes. Is it in the United States?
Yes.
Absolutely it is. And we're not immune to it. In fact, I think some of the worst corruption is in a place like America, where we should certainly, for a country that, with the level of democracy and history that we have, we should certainly be
more transparent.
More transparent, yeah.
100%.
Yeah, I think we have almost a duty to be, and the not calling it out is makes everyone complicit.
100%.
So, I want to take a step back, and you're 24 years old.
Yes.
When did you You seem so neck deep into this, and I look back just 6 years, and you're 18 years old. Like when did you know that this is what you want to do?
My whole life, I've always been really dialed in to current affairs and the news and human-based storytelling. Yeah. So, from a really young age, I was always watching, like local news, but international coverage, and then original series like Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown, Lisa Ling, This Life with Lisa Ling. And then I watched a lot of foreign correspondence during the Arab Spring, which was when I thought, okay, I could see myself doing this, because I always thought I was going to die very young. So my fear threshold it's like very exponential. And so I thought I could go into these places because I know I'm not afraid. And I know I really believe that if I go to these places, I can speak to people who need a voice and have a really powerful story to tell, and hope that I can give them a platform and make that story become international, so people aren't blind to what's going on. Even though it's not happening in their backyard, it's happening in someone else's. So here's why you should care about it, or at least pay attention to it. So my whole life, I knew that I wanted to be a journalist. I had no idea how I was going to do it, but I knew that I would have to learn the languages, how to talk to people, how not to judge people, and how to know what's going on everywhere and not want to turn a blind eye. So, yeah, and
You've learned several languages, by the way.
Yeah.
How many?
Too many. Too many to even say, because then it's going to go back to the 3-letter agency idea. But...
Or Mossad, which is not 3-letter, but
or any of the intelligence agencies. But that for me was because I wanted to make sure that when I was communicating with people who had important stories to tell, that I could fully grasp what they had to say. It wasn't going through a translator. It wasn't going through an app. This person could tell me their story and convey their emotion and conviction, and I would fully be able to understand that and be able to relay it in the best way possible. Human communication is so important to me. I think like a lot of people overlook that. So that was a big deal. And so I started my journalism career like very young, because I knew that it's not a job. We were just talking about this. This isn't a job. It's really a lifestyle. Like, I'm very passionate about this. And I started telling stories from as young as I can remember, and interviewing people, and starting things, even if I had to pay to work, for a lot of time I was losing money doing this. I wasn't making $1, and I was okay with that, because I never did this for the money. I did this simply for the passion. And I knew that if I stuck to it and I could really prove that I was good to it, eventually there would be some payoff, and I'd be able to not, be like a starving journalist, as corny as that is, right? And so I started a little podcast, I started a blog. I would go interview people who were doing drugs, who were selling drugs when I was a teenager. And that was a really great learning opportunity for me, because I I realized just what kind of journalist I wanted to be, and I didn't want to be on either side of the spectrum. I don't participate in politics, and I never wanted the stories to be politically charged. The point was to get the message across, which is this person is suffering. Why? At the cost of what? At the hands of who? And that way people could form their own opinions. That was out of my hand, but I could just at least paint the picture.
At what point did you decide to leave Canada and head to Mexico? And how'd you pull that off? On your own, right? Because you did it on your own.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't believe that, but I had been working in Canadian media for about 2 years, and I always knew I wanted to go international and tell international stories because it was a fresh set of eyes, but I still had a solid understanding of the political and historical context in Mexico, and geographically it was close, so I could go to Mexico, and if I needed to get the fuck out or if I wanted to go home, I could, and I knew I was going to be alone, so it was going to be a big undertaking. And so I quit my really stable and good job it was a great job.
Where was it?
I was a reporter at CBC, so it was very stable, normal. And I said, okay, I'm going to quit. I'm going to go to Mexico and see how this plays out. Went to Mexico, really, paid my dues. I had to start from zero. I didn't have sources. I didn't know how I was going to contribute or make money or really tell proper stories, because it went from having a whole newsroom behind me to I was the newsroom. So I had to be the producer. I had to find the stories, edit the stories, tell the stories, everything, film, cut up, you name it. And I got really used to that. Like I always say, I'm a cockroach. I can adapt really well to whatever situation I'm in. And I did that. So as soon as I got a taste of it, I knew no matter how hard it was going to be to make this sustainable, it was going to be worth it, because a lot of the people I were talking to were facing extreme suffering. And for me, I chose to be there. These people didn't. They had no other choice, and they didn't have an out. So at the very least, all right, let's get your story out there. Let's make sure people know what the is actually happening in this place and why it's happening, and all of the people who allow this to go on.
And you were reporting it to social media, YouTube.
So I was doing social media, but I was also contributing to outlets. I had to make money somehow. So I was
selling the stories.
Yeah, I was selling stories, radio, TV, web, and whoever took it, whichever outlet. And I've reported for all mainstream, like across the board, whether that's CNN, BBC, Fox, MSNBC, you name the outlet, I've probably contributed something, and I've said the same shit on all of them. So yeah,
it's unbiased and
completely.
Yeah. So take you all the way till now, you're hosting Borderlands.
Yep, Borderlands Dispatches.
What is that, and how's that fit into your mission? Because first of all, like before you answer that, you are clearly mission focused. You don't care about a show or money. Like, so how's that fit into your mission?
So at Ironclad, they've basically allowed me to just have like a team to gather all of this content and tell the best story possible. So now I don't have to be afraid when I'm going into the hostile environment, because I'm not going alone. I'm going in with training, and I'm going in with people who have my back and also can do their job. So I'm not worried about getting the shot and talking to the person and making sure buddy over there doesn't, knock me across the head and put me into the back of his truck. I have people for that. And it's about telling high stakes stories. That's their mission, and that's also mine. So there's so much freedom to go, and literally I can go to a place where if I spit, it lands on a story, and okay, cool, go tell that story and tell it in the most unbiased way. And that was sort of an issue for me at a point in time, because it came to this turning point where I was getting a lot of offers for people being like, come here. And I was getting pulled every which way. And I was like, but yeah, sure, the paycheck looks good, but I want to make sure that these stories really are being told honestly and raw and gritty. That's the whole point of this, and that's what makes it good. So
you feel like in the media space that's a missing
100%.
I
think that a lot of people are kind of pushed against. There's so much polarization now in media, and it's honestly, it's really unfortunate. It makes
someone
me sad.
like you, like if I'm a network, someone like you is like a great person to hire. But now I hire someone like you that's driven and passionate and wants to tell these stories. I'm going to put you into my corporate mission, and
you can't say
it
this.
robs you from it robs you from your autonomy and independence.
And you could probably tell I'm very blunt. Not everyone loves that, especially when it comes to the swearing. But it really does go to show, like, I will say it how it is. This is what I saw. I'm not going to tell you what to believe. And it honestly, the degradation of mainstream media is so heartbreaking for me, because mainstream media is what made me passionate about journalism. Like watching these CNN original series and watching certain journalists at certain networks. And so now seeing that.
But it's just a shift, because the degradation of mainstream media is the reason we're sitting here on this podcast.
True.
Because truth is always going to find its way to the surface. Somehow you can't contain it. You can't hide it. You can't.
The truth
you can't
always
stick a
reveals
flashlight
itself.
in a dark room and not see you glare. Like, and so if the mainstream media is not going to do it, there's a demand for it. That's why you're being successful, because there's a demand for it. And so you see things like independent podcasts popping up and independent journalists like yourself. And so,
and I really
it's just a shift of
respect,
things.
like when people are doing this,
Yeah.
it's, well, all my respect, because you are really giving a voice to undertold truths and stories, and there's no agenda.
No, and it's not a. I mean, if you're on Fox News right now, which I go on Fox News quite a bit, or CNN, you're gonna get about 3 minutes of talking time on a 5-minute segment between the interviews. You don't get a whole lot.
You
of
can't
time.
go into depth.
No. By the way, I'm looking back here. I don't know if you know, but every guest gets a custom background.
I love this background.
This is you. This is you get the Mexico.
Wow.
I can't even read that. I can't even read that, but you can.
Policía Federal Prohibido El Paso. That's awesome. With the camera, the press, and arrests and cartel violence. Oh, this is so awesome.
Yep. So these guys made that for you.
Good job, guys. I really appreciate it.
Working with Borderlands, you're going to get the opportunity. Now you got a whole team around you.
Yep.
I know Jeremy asked me if I jump in and help out, and I introduce you to some guys that I've been overseas with. And there's a lot of things you want to do that I think a lot of people want to support, including me, like want to support you.
It's so funny because we align so much with like our mission and what we're interested in doing and who we want to talk to, but we're so different. Like if you put us next to each other and was like, are these the same people? I think the public would be like, no, but there's a lot of similarities.
Yeah, well, I think one is you're extremely passionate and driven about what you do. I am too. I feel all the work I do, are things that I feel super burdened to do. Like I don't choose to do them because they're good opportunities, or even a show. Like I didn't choose, hey, it'd be cool to do a podcast. It's like I feel burdened to have a platform that could communicate the lessons that I'm learning, that the people that I'm getting to meet, stories of like courage and sacrifice, and people like you that are going out and doing stuff like that. So this is like a calling for me. And I think that's where we really align.
And it comes through with the way that you talk too, because it doesn't seem like you're just here like it's a job and, it's a moneymaker. You're genuinely interested in hearing these stories.
Yeah, this is way too hard to do for money. There's a lot easier ways to make money. In fact, I don't think we make any
I'd work
money
for
on
the
this show.
cartel.
Yeah,
No, I'm
exactly. If you're doing it just for money, then
no,
there's no morals into it. Yeah.
And now we want to go international, and I really appreciate you setting me up with people to make that a reality, because it's not easy.
No, I mean, it's so the individuals I introduced you to this morning, and I won't say who yet. We could say whenever you're ready, but I mean, all former special operations guys. Some of the guys are still in special operations. They're doing stuff around the world, doing humanitarian rescues, and have access. I always say this, like this is kind of something from special operations. You can be as good as you want to be at something. A gunfighter, a hostage rescue team, a business person, a journalist, but unless you could get there to do it, it doesn't matter, right? It's irrelevant, right? So you have to have access and placement to be able to do that. We call that access and placement. And one of the things that some of these guys that introduce you to, they have access and placement to a number of countries around the world and doing operations. And so a lot of places you want to go those same places, and we could team up and get you out there and tell those stories, and then you can also tell us some of the stories, some of the stuff they're doing.
100%.
So
because they also have like a really a mission that they're passionate about, and it's all rooted in goodness, which I think is really it's really rare these days to come across people
Very.
like that. So I
Very.
really respect people when I do encounter their passion to do good things.
Well, I thought you guys were going to talk for like 10 minutes and you were there for like 4
3
hours.
Yeah, we literally spoke the whole morning.
Yeah.
And there was no lack of conversation or topics to talk about. And it was really interesting because they were saying, it's so weird that you are telling us all these places that you want to go cover and the stories that you want to gather. We've been, scoping out these exact same places. This is exactly where we're planning to go. So we're on to something. They're like, I'm like, it's meant to be. They're like, it's God. I'm like, it's funny because, I'm not a very religious person, but I can like always respect it. And it's nice to come across people who have like a mutual understanding of just having purpose.
Yeah.
Either way, aside of whatever, like.
Yeah, I'm a real strong person of faith, and the guy that you were with in there, he is 100% like, he will not do anything unless he feels like God's calling him and God has like opened the doors for him. So
that's exactly what he told me.
Yeah. So I can tell you this, you'd be in good hands with those guys.
And I felt that for sure because so since covering all of like the organized crime in Mexico and the cross-border stuff, I've always wanted to go international. And now it seems like this is really the next step here, is like telling the stories of everyone impacted by this. And also because as you're uncovering transnational organized crime, you realize that, it has no limits. It has no borders, literally. Right. And so I've been like, okay, we need to go global at this point. And then you introduced me to, and you have the same ideology as me with that. And then you introduced me to people who are like, we can get you there and make sure you don't die. And it's the first time.
It's a really important part.
Yes.
Not to die.
It is. It's like a pivotal part here. And it's so funny because I've never had protection. I told them, I said, I don't use protection. And now being able to go and do these hard-hitting stories and feeling like, okay, someone has my six. Like I don't have to worry about all of the outside stuff. I can really just focus on the story. It's
very important. I think you should do what you do well and bring along other people that do what they do well. And if one of those things be keeping you safe, then that's a pretty important thing.
Yeah.
And you could be, have the comfort to just peace of mind and do your job and be a journalist. And
there's so many wars going on right now.
There's no shortage of content.
There is no shortage of tragedy.
So what is a place that you're aware of some atrocity going on that you could share with us, like what's going on there and that you want to get into?
Okay, let's see. Let's start at the top of the list here. I really want to get into Gaza, and I've had a lot of people on social media message me about why aren't you covering the conflict between Israel and Palestine? And I it's like a very polarized topic, right? So as someone coming from, okay, we're going to cover this in a way where I want to show everything that's going on. Mm-hmm. There are so many people dying there and who have completely lost their livelihoods and any quality of life. It is a textbook tragedy. It's heartbreaking anytime I see anything coming out of that region. Yeah. And they're so willing to get in there and go up to the front lines because right now no one can get to the front lines.
Oh, you're talking about the guys that introduced you this morning?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. They just got back from.
I know. And he's like, why didn't you talk to me a few weeks ago? I'm like, I didn't know you. And so like even just this past week, the entire Al Jazeera team was killed. And like I said, media and journalism is a pillar of democracy. Journalism is not a crime. Killing journalists is a crime. It's a war crime. And any attack on freedom of press, immediately, I have no respect for whoever does that.
Yeah.
And so I want to go in there and be able to safely go in there. I want to come out alive so that I can tell this story and so that people can see what is going on the front lines. I mean, there are some incredible journalists who have been stuck there and stuck in this war who are reporting, and their lives have been completely destroyed by this war. So And I think once people reach out to me and they're like, Katarina, go and show us what's happening, it like kind of puts this big responsibility and trust on me that there are people who actually really trust what I'm saying and the way I report, that they're like, we want you to go and do this and see this. It's like a big responsibility. I don't even know how to articulate how I feel about that. And before going there, I have to do a lot of due diligence because I want to tell this story in the best way possible.
If you're on the streets of Gaza right now, who are you going up to interview?
Anyone. This is a man on the street situation. I want to hear what everyone has to say. I mean, if I could spend weeks in there, I would, because there are, in the last 24 hours, probably over 100 people have died. So everyone has something to say. And I'll never forget watching an episode of Anthony Bourdain's Parts Unknown when he went into Gaza and he sat down and ate with a family at their home and and people were saying how they've been kicked out of their homes and just all of the conflict that had been stemming for decades. And now it's really obviously come to a head. So, and he's gone now. So, and I think that if he were here, he would go and he would have a lot to say. And he would want to talk to everyone.
He's awesome.
Yeah. So I'd love to go there and talk to anyone and everyone who's willing to talk. And I think a lot of people want their stories to be heard, because when you're living in war, there is no shortage of stories and of tragedy, and just, it's really heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. So I don't even know what to say about this. Yeah, that's where I want to go. That's top of the list, and they're happy to take me.
Yes. Yeah, they said that. Number two.
Where do you think I should go? What would you say is top of the list?
I have a really close connection to Afghanistan and Ukraine because of my time there, obviously. So, but I have a personal connection to those areas. When the U.S. evacuated and withdrew and surrendered, I'll use the word surrender. When we surrendered Afghanistan on behalf of the world to the Taliban, which is an atrocity that we did that, we left 20 million women and little girls behind. And it's really irritating to me personally to see what I believe is clickbait, like false manufactured rage about Me Too and all this stuff about women's rights and the whole feminism movement, when we have places around the world, and Afghanistan being one example, we have 20 million women and little girls have been completely stripped of human rights and are being sexually enslaved right now, and no one wants to speak about it. Not one news media wants to speak about it. And their stories, those women's stories, need to be told. So for me, I'm certainly not encouraging you to go to Afghanistan.
Well, actually, number 2 on the list is Afghanistan.
Yeah,
that's on our plan here.
That story needs to be told, and I think it needs to be told from a woman.
So it's funny that you say, well, not funny, but it's interesting that you say that, because when I was talking to Aziz this morning, I said to him, what do you think I should cover there? And, he goes on about how the Taliban's ideology and how they turn into crooks at night and how they take advantage of the power that they've been left with and the lack of any social order. And I said to him, look, the main thing that I really want to go and do is I want to talk to any woman and girl that will talk to me, completely conceal her identity and her location, obviously. Because as Aziz was telling me, women cannot go to school after 6th grade there. All of his daughter's friends who were ready to go to university had to completely abandon that. They're gone. They can't go to the markets alone if they are not accompanied by a man. If there is a household of women who they have been left without a man in the household, Taliban goes in there. They're sneaky, right? They'll go in there when no one's watching and rape them. And
then they're worthless at that point to the culture.
Yeah.
They have no more value. And
Yeah,
many of them will commit suicide or be shunned into street poverty.
Yeah, because aside from the trauma from the sexual violence, now you also are deemed worthless in society. Yes. So, you also can't even seek medical attention. So God forbid that this person gives you any disease or completely like actually causes damage or harm, then what do you do, right?
Yeah, you can't be a female can't be a doctor, can't see a male doctor, so there's no medical care.
No. And I cannot imagine living a life like that. Like I was just telling you, I grew up with all men. So, but now, like as a young woman, I see things like this and I cannot even begin to comprehend what that life, the quality or lack of, looks like. So ideally, I do want to go to Afghanistan and I want to give these people a voice because these are some of the most voiceless people in our world right now. And I know that they're willing to talk. I said to Aziz, I said, so are they going to talk to me? Like we'll cover their identities entirely. And I don't want to even have to persuade them to talk to me. He goes, you won't need to persuade them to talk to you. No. They want the international community to know their stories. And I cannot imagine that feeling of desperation. Like I just, if I could go over there tomorrow, it would be a done deal.
Yeah, they're very courageous, and they
of course
care about their the fellow females there. They want to speak up, but I mean, to me, it's a complete global atrocity, and it should be every journalist around the world should be ashamed that they will not touch that story of these because they're so worried about embarrassing the last administration.
And oh man, if this is where I have a trouble with kind of separating the job from my own thoughts here because. Going there and speaking to these women, I know how it's going to make me feel. And I don't get sad. I get mad. I don't have sadness emotion. I have anger emotion. So they tell me, oh, yeah, so-and-so guy did this to me or whatever. I know I'm just going to want to go and chop their head off and just them up, for lack of better language.
I just was talking to the staff earlier. They said when a woman gets mad, I think the thing we just say, calm down.
Yeah. You're dead. Yeah, no way. You don't Female revenge all the way, and it just sucks because then you see these men who they think they're so powerful and high and mighty and they taste a little bit of power and what do? They go and rape the women. Yeah. The women are, they victimize them. For what? That makes you tough?
Yeah, it's... Yeah, Afghanistan in that sense is horrible, and the Taliban is the worst at it. And it is a shame that anyone would even consider them a legitimate government and nothing more than what they are. And that's terrorist thugs who are brutalizing women and children.
But I am hoping going there, I would like to speak to the spokesperson for the Taliban.
Yeah.
Aziz said he might speak to you.
Yeah, it depends on the angle
tell me why you should be considered a legitimate government by the international community. I know that I'm not going to be able to ask I might sneak one or two in there of the questions I really want to ask, but I also want to get out alive. So
yeah, a lot of times too. There's interviews that could be done there. But there's also some neutral ground locations that they would meet.
We have some plans for that. Yeah.
But like I said, that's one of the beautiful things about what you do is that everyone wants to tell their side of the story.
Everyone will talk.
Even the Taliban.
Yep.
Everyone wants to tell their side of the story.
And a lot of people don't understand that. They're like, why do these people talk to you? Or no way these people are willing to chat. Everyone wants to tell their side of the story, and everyone has a story to tell, whether it's incriminating or not, or, or paints them in a bad light or not. And typically a lot of these guys, like what you were saying, they're so egocentric and narcissistic that they believe that they can convince the public to see them in a positive light, no matter what they're doing.
100%.
And so they'll talk to you. And especially if someone like me comes, just a young woman, men love to talk to women and love to feel heard. So there's a lot of people who aren't going to like that, but it is true, Yeah. And if you feel heard and to a certain extent understood, you will share more than you're probably even likely to share going into that interview.
100%. Yeah, I agree with you. Okay, so if you had 60 seconds where you're before Congress or Parliament, what would you tell them on this topic?
On the cartel topic?
Yeah, on the topic of the cartels.
Okay, well, I would say that in order to actually protect everyone that has been a victim or could be a victim of organized crime and the cartels, the pride of getting the bad guy or the infamy of the operation needs to be put to the side. And every action that's taken in order to combat the cartels has to be considered with the human toll. So no more giving the visas and immunity to family members of major cartel bosses. No more Kingpin strategy where you cut off the head or you kidnap and set up a cartel boss in order to let these cartels fight each other for power and eventually let them crash in on themselves in hopes that this cartel is obliterated. Every operation needs to take into consideration the human toll. I know that these people would completely disagree with me because they say, you gotta, whatever the idiom is of cracking a few eggs and get the shells, whatever. I don't care about that. I have seen so much ugly stuff and the saddest stories and victims who have done everything to keep themselves out of this lifestyle and yet still get caught in the crosshairs. Consider the human toll. Consider the humans who are living this. I've been there. I've seen these people. I've seen even not just, kids whose parents have lost their jobs because there's no more economy in these regions because there's so much infighting, and now they're being walked to school, and on their way to school they see battered and murdered bodies on the side of the road. You're telling me that these kids aren't going to grow up to have a completely up perception of what security means and what an honest job means if their parents can't even work an honest job, and they're probably going to end up dead if the only means of getting money is to work for a criminal organization? This is a generational problem, and it continues to be because there is no consideration for the human toll and suffering.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people don't care about that, so.
Well, I do. And
yeah, we both do. That's why we understand.
Yeah. I mean, look, I get to, one of the things I get to do is travel around the country a lot, and the media's voice has not really reflected the voice of the people. And,
it hasn't.
And I think at least I can speak for in America. America is a country that the people still really care.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is they're elected officials. These are constituents that send the representative, and their voice hasn't been communicated in our capital. So their voice isn't heard in the halls of Congress, and as they have the representatives go in the media, their just voice is not heard. But I think America is, as a whole, represents a culture that cares about what's right and
I agree.
cares about people. But the media just doesn't reflect it. And so your voice as independent journalists is extremely important and timely in the history of where we are today.
Thank you. I hope so. I try my best to make sure that my reporting reflects that. I always try to bring in that human component. Mm-hmm. And even though I'm Canadian, the majority of my followers are American. Mm-hmm. And even though there are a lot of people who follow my reporting who are very far removed with a lot of the content that I report on, they still care. They still feel bad for people in Mexico who are living day-to-day violence and shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. And it gives me a little bit of hope and humanity to know that even if something's not happening in your backyard, you still care about it and care about it enough to stay tuned into it.
Yeah, one of the things that never hits the media is America as a nation is a real generous nation and a compassionate nation. We're the biggest giver philanthropically around the world, and it continues to increase year over year. So Americans are, beyond our tax dollars, they're giving to charities and different causes around the world because they are a nation that cares. And we have the highest legal immigration rate of any country in the world by far. Germany's number 2, and we far exceed Germany. So I think it's a nation of people that care, and you could tell if they're tuning into what you're doing, it's because they care.
You sound like you're sponsored by the United States of America.
I'm a very patriotic guy.
It comes across.
I love America, but I hate who our government is and what our government's doing right now. And I think people, you think you can't do both, but you can.
Of course.
So I love our history. I love who we are as a nation. I don't like our politics. I don't like who we are as a country politically right now. And I don't mean that to this administration. I think I campaigned for President Trump, and I voted for him to be in office, and he's making some great changes. But the institution of the American government as a whole, I don't trust, I don't like, and I say that because I love this country. So,
and I think that no matter who you vote for and where you stand on the political spectrum, it's always important to be critical of your government.
100%. Yeah.
I see a lot of people who will, very deeply support a certain party or a politician, and that actually defies democracy. That's not how it's supposed to be. You can vote and support a politician and a party, and you say it aligns with your values, but you still have to be critical of those people. Those people have a lot of responsibility, and as citizens, we have the responsibility to be critical of them and hold them to a high standard.
Yeah, I've even called out President Trump on certain things while I was campaigning as a surrogate on his campaign.
As you should.
And because just because I'm campaigning for him doesn't mean I agree with their policy, and I lose my authenticity if I blanket support.
For sure.
And so I think it's important, and I think everyone that has a voice should speak out on those things and hold them accountable. If you love something, you're gonna call out the bad things because you want to be better.
If you were to be tasked with dealing with, the cross-border organized crime, the cartels, like what would your set of operations be? What do you think would be the most important action to take?
Well, I mean, I think they're being taken right now. I think looking at who's coming in and out on the visa front and on the visas, like who is coming in and out, what visas are we allowing in for people to come in legally, and then sealing the borders tight for the illegal immigration. You have to do it, and we have, by the way, America has the complete ability to shut down our borders and control our borders. We have legal points of entry, and we have the ability to control those legal points of entry. This isn't the problem that everyone thinks it is. That's what President Trump has said for over a decade, that this is controllable. The problem he faces is he has to deal with, it's not an complete executive decision. And so he's navigated that. And I think his first 4 years, he learned some hard lessons of the things he tried to do on the immigration side, and the sanctioning of terrorist groups, and classifying these cartels as terrorist groups. These are all like some of the exact things that I would do.
It's certainly
and then
effective.
I think one of the other things would be who is in the country and that has violated by the way, on the books immigration laws, who has violated those, getting those criminal actors out. And that's a big, like in America right now, that's a big point of contention about. But look, the Homeland
Immigration
Security
will always be super polarized. Yeah.
Homeland Security, all these things, like these are laws that are on the books, and these are laws that are there for a reason. And if you don't like the laws, then we could talk about changing the laws. But Homeland Security has a responsibility to enforce those laws. And
it's black and white.
Yeah.
And so my question to that then, if you say, you agree with how the administration is tackling this, and especially with the visa restrictions and following the laws, what does it make you think when you hear news that, multiple family members of El Chapo, one of the most notorious drug lords, cartel bosses in history, his family members were given visas and allowed to come into the United States and given immunity?
Well, I agree with you. I think I think that is a mistake in the fact that you don't negotiate with terrorists. There's no compromises. It has to be a blanket across the board. It gives the wrong messaging that you have exemptions, and you lose confidence in the process. And right now, one of the biggest problems in the United States from people like me who I just spoke against my love for the government, not the country, the government, is because we don't trust our government anymore. And so if you're going to reestablish the trust in our institutions and our three-letter agencies and our judicial system on a federal level, like you can't have those kind of compromises.
So do you think that establishing trust would still have to do with, so say, for example, in this same case where these family members were let in, this was an ploy to access and gain more information that perhaps in the long run could allow the U.S. government to hit the cartels harder? Does that justify it for you?
I don't think it does. Like there's always a greater good. There's this greater good idea and compromise, and there's a space for that, and sometimes, but they also, that line, when you start crossing that line shifts.
And it becomes blurry.
It becomes very blurry, yeah. And it's a slippery slope. And so for me, and I'm on the outside looking in, and so are you. We're not in that position. So I say that to say we're not privy to all the information.
For sure.
But for me, on the outside looking in, I say, that's a line that they probably shouldn't be crossing, and it's a slippery slope.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think we stand very similarly on this topic,
Yeah.
which is good to know because it affects Americans, and then it affects the very people that I talk to on a daily basis south of the border and in the US. And I think that the consensus is very clear. Like, in both these countries, despite the conflict that we've been seeing, people who are not part of organized crime do not want to become victims of organized crime and don't want these groups to flourish. I think where the separation of opinions begins is how to deal with this, because you guys in America are very safe from a lot of the collateral damage, whereas in Mexico, these people become victims of these actions taken to take down the bad guys. But you end up hurting a lot of good people too.
Yeah. In all this, you're just getting started. I know you seem like you've been doing this for a long time, but really, in your lifetime, you said you're not going to live long. I'm going to disagree with you. I think you're going to.
Well, now I got protection.
Yeah, you have a long, healthy life, and you're going to have a lot of successes. You're going to win that Pulitzer Prize one day,
God willing. Yeah.
And so, but aside from Pulitzer Prize, did I say it right?
Yeah.
What do you want to be remembered for as a journalist?
See, it's not even about me being remembered, but if there is...
Well, I say, what do you want to accomplish?
Yeah.
What do you most want to accomplish?
If I can accomplish exposing truths and telling stories that actually make a positive impact on someone's life and in some way, shape, or form change the trajectory from a bad place to maybe a better place, that's very fulfilling for me. For the longest time, it was just a matter of I never thought, I'm going to change the world. Of course, that's very naive, but I just wanted people to feel heard and feel like their stories mattered and people were listening. But now I feel like I'm accomplishing that. And so the goal now is to ensure that what I'm doing has tact, it's long lasting. This isn't just becomes part of the daily news cycle. I want to ensure that these people feel like my reporting is actually affecting in some way, shape, or form some sort of change.
Yeah. I truly believe that educating and informing people changes culture, it changes people's lives, and it has an impact. It's a very powerful tool.
It is.
For bad or good. And obviously you're trying to use it for good. So that's an important thing.
Yeah, if I was doing for bad, I wouldn't be sitting here right now.
But doing it is hard.
It's really
it's
hard.
a hard job. It's an uphill battle. It's a competitive space to work in. You're competing against a lot of other narratives. You're rising to the top. But it is. I know it's not easy, and it requires a tremendous amount of resilience. That's the name of the show, The Resilience Show. So I think you have a lot of lessons that you could probably share in resilience. We talk on this show about these 4 pillars of resiliency: being mentally tough, physically healthy, socially surrounding yourself with the right people, having a strong spiritual foundation. Those are the kind of different things we talk about in the show. What are some lessons that you could share with the audience on through your journey on being resilient?
In my short life that I lived so far, I have been tasked with having to be pretty resilient and overcoming a lot of obstacles. Aside from my career, even just in my personal life, a lot of bad shit that shouldn't happen to someone at such a young age. But I have come to learn that I appreciate every experience that I've ever had. Even if in the moment it was this is the worst thing that's happening to me. And there have been moments where, honestly, it's some of people's worst nightmares that have happened to me. But those experiences have taught me lessons that have shaped me into the person that I am, that have shaped the perception that I have on my life and the world around me, and my appreciation for every other human life that surrounds me. So I don't regret anything, and I don't view any previous experience as a negative one, because everything taught me something. And I never dwell on like future problems. And I always try to tell my friends that, you know, if there's something, don't anticipate a problem or a grievance or a negative experience. Deal with it once it happens, process it, and then leave it in the past. Learn from it and move forward. And that's the best you can do, because life will never be perfect. It will always be full of ups and downs, positive and negative experiences. But truly, you just have to be resilient.
Yes.
Yeah.
You do. Well, I thank you for coming on and speaking with me.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Yeah. And I am very proud of what you're doing.
Thank you.
And want to support. You know, I know Jeremy and I are in touch, and we're gonna support you at Borderlands, and whether it's connections or whatever you need. One of the main things I want to make sure is that you're safe.
Thank you. I really do appreciate that. It means a lot.
Yeah, because you have a long life ahead, and you got to be alive to get that Pulitzer
to tell the stories.
Prize.
Yeah.
You got to be alive to tell the stories. You got to be alive to get that Pulitzer Prize. So we're gonna do our best to make sure that you don't die, as you said earlier.
Thank you. That means a lot. It really does.
But hey, look, we have some amazing sponsors on our show. We have
and I was
Mighty Oaks
supposed to get a
Foundation's
great
My
gift,
Foundation.
wasn't I?
You're supposed to get some several great gifts. We're going to give you some BioPro, which is really great, like a supplement from one of our friends at BioPro. We were talking about Medellin, Colombia earlier.
Yep.
Our friends at BioAccelerator, Medellin, Colombia. Just amazing people down there. They do stem cell therapy. We have Smith & Wesson Firearms, Vortex Optics, and Gators Eyewear. And I know, because you're not yet an American, you're still a Canadian. You guys are not allowed to have guns.
We'll hold off on that until I get down here. Because
we're going to give you a rain check. And as soon as you're welcome, how about this? Your welcome to America gift will be a Smith & Wesson firearm with a Vortex
tears
Optics
of joy.
and some Gator.
I will stay strapped.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. So, yep. So thanks to all of our sponsors, and thanks again to you. We're going to put all of the stuff, ways to follow you and watch Borderlands in our show notes.
Watch my podcast,
below.
subscribe to my Substack. I write about all the breaking news, and I try to analyze everything. So
awesome. Yeah. We'd love to keep you connected with our Patreon audience too.
Okay, would love to.
And some of the stuff, like our Patreon audience will probably really love some of the stuff you're putting out, and they could kind of collaborate back to all the stuff you're doing.
For sure. So that would be great.
If you have not already done so, please like, comment, share this, and subscribe on whatever platform you're watching. And also, please join our Patreon family. If you're not part of our Patreon family, it's the best way you could support the show. Here's some behind-the-scenes content. We're about to jump into some Patreon questions.
Awesome.
So one of the things that I didn't tell you is they actually write. We let our Patreon members know who's coming on. They'll send in questions, and then you can answer directly to them.
Okay.
And so we'll do that right after this. If you could go over to Patreon and watch that, and much more behind-the-scenes content. So see you next week. God bless, and stay resilient. Hey, what's up, Resilient family? I am so grateful for each of you who tune in every week to hear our episodes. We have such incredible guests and topics that I am passionate about, our team's passionate about, and we could not do it without you. So we're thankful for you. We love you. We appreciate you locking arms with us to be more informed, to become a more resilient community. And I want to invite you to become a tighter part of that community by joining us on Patreon. If you go to our show notes below, you can click the link and get dialed into our Patreon and get extra content weekly. You could join for $15 a month and get behind-the-scenes footage, get closer access to me. I have monthly Zooms that I'll be doing with some members of the community. And so we'd love to get more involved. Again, go below in the show notes and click the link and join today.